I'm Lois Evans. I'm this year's president for PASEF, which is the Penn Association of Senior and Emeritus Faculty. And I'm really pleased to be able to welcome each of you to our fall lecture, our annual fall lecture. It was this time last year that Duncan Van Dusen was honored by our group because Duncan had a long history of helping to forward the efforts of the 25-year club, which does have its celebration just following this lecture, and we had always had these two together. So he was a very strong planner and coordinator with us for that program. And Duncan passed away this spring, and I think it would be appropriate if we just took a moment for a moment of silence in remembrance of all of his contributions to our efforts. Thank you. Any of you who visit our offices will see that we have inherited his old office, and it's been redecorated, and it now does have a photograph of him hanging in there. So we're really pleased to have his energy with us as we move forward. The second thing I'm happy to do is to introduce you to our esteemed speaker today, Mr. Craig Carnaroli. Craig's face is not new to any of us who spent any time in the university since in the last 18 years. After completing his undergraduate and graduate business degrees at Penn and at Stanford, and serving as vice president of Merrill Lynch, the Municipal Securities Division, he joined Penn in 2000, first as the vice president for finance and treasurer, and then was named executive vice president in 2004. A strong partnership formed between then newly inaugurated President Gutmann and Mr. Carnaroli. This partnership has made possible the tremendous achievements to date related to the Penn Compact. The Compact was first initiated by Dr. Gutmann when she arrived in 2004, and recently was re-envisioned as the Penn Compact 2020, focused specifically on inclusion, innovation, and impact. It has not been by accident that Mr. Carnaroli's portfolio encompasses nearly everything contributing to the university's daily functioning and long-term growth. His stewardship has nurtured Penn's steady progress within sound environmental, safety, financial, and people parameters. He is often the face of the university as he serves on many boards and commissions in the greater community. In short, Craig's insightful leadership and management as Penn's most senior non-academic officer has been critical to the changes shaping its physical campus, financial strength, and operational efficiency, all essential towards meeting the goals of the Compact. As I recall, Mr. Carnaroli sketched for us a few years back the outline of a new blueprint for the future. In his talk today, I hope he will update us with some of the accomplishments from that plan as he focuses on the university's newly evolving vision, especially in the area of innovation. So let's welcome Craig Carnaroli to the podium.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see so many familiar faces in the audience. And so last year, Jerry Porter was kind enough to invite me to talk to this group. And unfortunately, Vince Price's inauguration got in the way. And when we were planning that, I said, Jerry, what would you like me to talk about? And he said, you know, about anything you want. I'm like, wow, it's pretty broad. I need to narrow that down. And he said, why don't you talk about the future of higher education? And by the way, we're going to videotape it. Okay, I said, Jerry, are you trying to get me fired? Okay, all right. So I'm not a prognosticator. So as I dealt with the new chair, I said, it seems to me that this group might want to hear about some of the strategic initiatives the university is working on. We put a lot of effort into innovation, and so that's going to be the focus. But because we are a small group, I would just encourage you as we go along, raise your hand, ask questions, make comments. So I first want to start out with a bit of an apology in this way, which is that the words innovation and ecosystem are probably the most two overused words today when it comes to innovation. And I just did it again, in that everyone's talking about it. It's sort of a hot thing. But it's an important thing, and I'm going to sort of do that. And I want to set a little bit of context, and some of you will know this history better than I have. Sort of in one slide, how did we get from where we are today? But before I do, one of the things I do with the administrative team here at Penn is I try to give them context for higher education, the academy administration, in that we do our daily jobs, facilities, finance, but they often don't really truly understand higher education. So we have what we call a speaker series, and we invite faculty from Penn, and we actually invited the former provost of Columbia. Imagine the phone call. He was, Penn wants me to come down and talk. Jonathan Cole published this book called The Great American University. You can see it's quite thick. But Jonathan Cole came and talked to 90 administrative folks. And one of the things I learned from that is he talked about this sort of implicit contract with the government and universities, which is we provide you research dollars. We look for you to create intellectual property that can help then grow the economy. And so as this has evolved over time, though, and research funding is either cut or flat, is that implicit promise, is that arrangement sort of being jeopardized? And so it's a great book, but I do that because I think it's important as we start this topic that we kind of look a little bit at the history, which is that the collaboration between the government and higher education are the result of seeds that have been sown over many decades. And this is, again, one of the things we learned from the book. But if you go back to actually Franklin Roosevelt with Vanderveer Bush from MIT, basically promoting the creation of the National Science Foundation. And from that work, you get great work. And we have our former Dean of Engineering here and a longtime faculty member, the work of the ENIAC, which we still claim, great claim to. But it comes out of this relationship between the government and academia. And then in the 50s, with the return of veterans, you see a sort of a boom in higher education enrollment, the role of the government in supporting people getting access to higher education. The 60s and 70s are more of a transition of our economy, in that we become less of a manufacturing-oriented economy, more of a knowledge-based economy. In fact, there's a famous speech from the gentleman at University of California about the importance of the knowledge economy, which leads then to kind of the 80s, and sort of one of the linchpins of why we are where we are today is the creation of the Bayh-Dole Act, which is basically putting an obligation, a requirement on universities to, in fact, take their intellectual property and have a role in getting it into the marketplace. And so this sort of attraction innovation is sort of the result of over close to 80 years of effort around this collaboration that I think it's important to put in the context. So that's your history lesson. Okay, so let's now transition to where we are into today, which is that, as Lois, Dr. Evans indicated, as Dr. Gutman has shaped the vision that she would like Penn to realize, there are three pillars. First relates to inclusion, second related to innovation, the third related to impact. And so I think by making innovation one of the pillars of the vision of the university, it has really sparked a lot of enthusiasm among faculty, among postdocs, graduate students, and even undergraduates in this space. And it means many things to many people, and we're going to, over the course of the next 50 minutes, sort of unbundle that a little bit. But I will say, one of the credits I will give to Dr. Gutman is that she was a good listener, because as Eduardo can affirm for me and others in the room, the faculty in general, and it's tough to ever say the faculty because there are 12 diverse faculties here at Penn, we're sort of unhappy with the service of the former technology transfer organization, which led her to say, we need to rethink how we're organized to, one, support the faculty, two, create a better portal front door for people that want to work with faculty, and then three, create a place for some of this activity to occur that isn't really appropriate in sort of basic science in our traditional lab settings. And that is, in fact, we'll talk a little bit about place with the Pennovation Center. So transitioning now, one of the dynamics I'd love to leave you with is, or messages, is that the innovation ecosystem is robust and dynamic here at Penn. And it encompasses sort of 5 different categories, and we won't go through these one by one. You can take a deep sigh of relief. Largely, it is in both education and support, and you see various activities that are spread really across the university. The law school, for example, has a great clinic around intellectual property. Student clubs have always been a big part of this. One of the big emerging areas now, particularly with Vanguard putting an actual incubator in the city, is this fintech. Financial technology is a hot area. Incubators and accelerators, where we create kind of the support space for faculty startups as well as student-led startups to be at the Penn Innovation Center. And then, as I'll show you in more detail, a lot of competitions, events, awards, Wharton Business Plan competition. Our App It Up is one of the largest, where basically students come together in a concentrated 48, 72 hours, work together to develop applications that are judged and awarded, and prizes are made. So a lot of different dimensions around the ecosystem. And I should say, if you look at this, it really does touch every school. In the education space, the Milliken family has given a prize to GSE for innovative ideas in the application of education. Generally, it's in the software application, but you can see it really touches all 12 schools. One of the things I've noticed about Penn during my time at Penn is how more research intensive Penn has become. And I'm going to show you some data to that. So it could be just as a lowly undergraduate back in the day when I was doing work for Anita Summers, I just was oblivious to all of it because my life was in Wharton and in arts and sciences. But it feels in my current role how research intensive. So I went back and looked at the data. Just the revenues of the university exclude the hospitals, because the hospitals always mess up the data. So we pushed them to the side for a second. And just look at that yellow bar for a second. The yellow bar is sort of the percentage of the university's revenues that come from sponsored research activity or grant awards. And so you see there back in '83, it was 25%, fairly stable. Big jump in '03. Now that, in fact, was, I think, a large part of the NIH doubling and the ramp up that Penn Medicine went through in that period. And I see Yvonne shaking her head, yes. And now it's sort of at 34%. We have other sources growing, but you see, to get numbers that are big like this, percentage-wise, to move in any direction is hard. So I think it sort of says something to kind of the research volume and productivity of the faculty. So just to now take a more current snapshot of research activity at Penn, what this shows you is over 3 time periods, 2000, 2010, 2017, the amount of sponsored research going on at Penn. So 570.9 in 2000, basically nearly doubled by 2017. And then the colors sort of show you where that money comes from. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but generally, it won't shock you, the federal government is the largest source, with other, which would represent some more of the, I'm not sure what other would represent actually, because the foundation and nonprofits are in the green. You see what's growing though over time is that corporate, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, this corporate sponsored research and why that's happening. But you see there from 77 down to 70%. So on the one hand, if this were an investment portfolio, we might say, wow, that's incredibly undiversified. We need to have more balance in there. But the truth is, the largest source of funding that's available is with the federal government. So I think we're happy that's not 90%, but it's hard to imagine a world where that would be 50%, although, who knows? But that gives you a sense of where the dollars come from. And then what's the other beautiful thing about Penn is this is true across many schools. And so because the medicine will distort the axis, they're kind of broken out here. So you see on the left side kind of a 5-year time series of the School of Medicine and how that's ramped up over time. And then you see arts and sciences, or the next largest, engineering, big increase over time. veterinary medicine, dental medicine fairly stable, nursing growing, and then kind of everybody else, GSE, which would be kind of a large part of that. So again, this is not concentrated in one school, but spread across all the schools. And the reason I'm spending time on research is that this is where the dollars come for the basic inquiry that can lead to the intellectual property that leads to the innovation. So I think it's important to know where this all begins is with the faculty and the research dollars they attract to Penn. And as you know, not every research grant is going to be for commercial purposes. I mean, some of the work that the Annenberg School gets, for example, is around how do we do health promotion and how do we reduce smoking and the like. So it's not everything that's going to be kind of commercially applicable, but for this purpose, I haven't sort of broken that out. And so this is the wrap up. Last slide on this section is more just to give you the trends in research support. You see here, nice upward slope in total awards. NIH has been basically flat for us over a period of time. And there you see the different agencies within NIH, again, on this scale. But DOD is a big source, particularly in engineering, National Science Foundation, and the Department of Education. So that just gives you a flavor. So now I'm going to transition into really unbundling a bit around our activity. So once all this research dollars come in, what are we able to do with it in terms of intellectual property? But before I do, are there any questions or comments anyone wants to add here? All right, so we've laid the foundation. Okay, so this is sort of a three-part presentation so that you can follow along. So you'll say, oh, is he ever going to end, okay? In that we're going to focus on people, then process, and then the places where this happens, okay? So the 3 Ps. So it all starts with people, and the beauty of people is that there's so many interesting things going on here at Penn. And so even the Penn Center for Innovation, which is the body within Penn that works directly with faculty on their disclosures and arranges to get the patents and does the arrangements with the companies, you see the light bulb there, it starts with our faculty inventors, and they view themselves as an intermediary in connecting, accelerating with various arrangements that we're going to dive into. But I love the visual of this because the ideas generate with our highly esteemed faculty. So the big news around Penn, this won't shock you, is the incredible work that's come out of Carl June's lab, among others, Bruce Levine, several people. I mean, Carl will be the first to say it's a village that's created this, but this relates to the field of immunotherapy. And I should have said up front, I took high school biology, chemistry. I did not do well in physics. So please, no science questions. Or I have people to call on to help me. But I try to learn enough that I can talk about it. But essentially, this is this notion that you take your T cells out of the body, they're re-engineered, then they're able, through vectors, to fight cancer in the body. And we've been able to work with Novartis to develop this therapy. And it's really groundbreaking. There's a great headline in the Wall Street Journal that talks about if Ben Franklin were alive today, he would be proud that the University of Pennsylvania is the first to create this therapy to attack cancer. And so Carl's obviously a big success story and a big driver of the activity that I'm going to show you throughout the presentation. But it's not just Carl, and I want to be sure to say that, which is that we have lots of innovative faculty. Now, George Damaris is one of our PIK, or Penn Integrates Knowledge professors. He's actually a joint appointment in the School of Nursing and in the School of Medicine. And he does some very interesting work in the areas of data and informatics as it relates to healthcare delivery and education, sort of using technology as it relates to patients with chronic conditions and disabilities. And so really, really big recruit. Jaiya Tavani in our School of Arts and Sciences is a postdoc. She's a Schwartz Fellow Foundation, and her area of research interest is in brain mechanics and learning and memory. Now, the brain is, from what I hear in the meetings I'm in, sort of the final frontier, and a lot of work is being done at Penn in the neuroscience and the brain area. Danny Bassett is a MacArthur Genius Fellow, School of Engineering and Applied Science, and also does work in the area of the brain and complex systems. And then Mark Allen is someone Eduardo recruited to Penn as we opened the Sing Center. I hope you don't mind me embarrassing you this way, Eduardo, but Mark is a superstar we got from Georgia Tech in the field of nanotechnology, particularly as it relates to nanofabrication and micro-level electromechanical systems. So now some recent headlines that are going on here. You see this Penn Engineering got NSF grants as it relates to quantum. We have a new center that's a partnership of arts and sciences and medicine as it relates to neurodegenerative diseases. And then even in the art space, again, a partnership, arts and sciences and design as it relates to technologies that drive engagement in the arts. So this is a wide spectrum of activity. Also quite proud of our graduate students. I think one of the things when people talk about what can Penn do to drive the Philadelphia economy, if we're able to retain more of these superstar graduate students to be here in Philadelphia, I think it's kind of a game changer. And one of the nice things that has happened with the Pennovation Center, particularly with Vijay Kumar, Dean Kumar's decision to move the robotics lab to the Pennovation Center, is we're seeing graduate students in the lab do some spin-out companies. So one of the ones I love to talk about is these two young gentlemen here on the left, Alex and Daniel. So they had a startup company, and it's this classic thing. The gentleman who runs Pennovation for us says, so there were two kids on a bike. They came down. Before we knew it, and they just took some sort of old warehouse space. Then it was 4, then it was 8, then it was 16, and then this company in San Diego called Qualcomm said, we like what you're doing, okay? We want to buy your company and make you a research arm of Qualcomm. Qualcomm is one of the top Fortune 50 companies in the world. And so, of course, our heart sank because who wouldn't want to live in San Diego, right? I mean, the mountains, the sunshine, the ocean. But when Qualcomm came, and as gritty as Pennovation looks, they said, we want to be right here. We want to be where this whole activity is. So we actually, Qualcomm established a center right next to the Pennovation Center. But this would not have happened were it not for the graduate students. And you have another engineering. So this young man you see here, Matt Piccoli, he is a 3-degree mechanical engineer at Penn, undergraduate, master's, and PhD. So he has a company called iMotion Control, and they deal with motion control systems, electrical motors as it relates to efficiency, velocity control. Sounds interesting. I could not explain it further than that. But again, he has sort of the support and the knowledge and wants to do it here in Philadelphia. So one of the things I'm going to share something with you that's not widely known, which is that we've created these prizes for undergraduates as it relates to innovation. We are in the final stages of a prize for the graduate students, sort of that are at the end of their graduate life at Penn. We don't want to distract them when they're a third-year PhD, where we want graduate students to come together and apply for a prize that they can then use to start a commercial business. And so, which is, again, I think this could be a key to kind of particularly with the tight labor markets we have and trying to change the trajectory of Philadelphia, that could be very powerful. But one of the areas Dr. Gutman is quite proud of is what we've done for undergraduates. One of the criticisms of higher education is we take these really bright young people and then they flock to 2 fields. They all want to go work on Wall Street or work in consulting. In fact, I remember when at Harvard, they were just astounded, like 50% of Harvard undergraduates were going this direction. And at Penn, having a Wharton undergraduate program, the intensity of this is, so we said, how do we change and give students some different options? And so we created these prizes called the President's Innovation Prize. And what they involve is they get a $100,000 prize to implement their project and a $50,000 living stipend per student. And these are donor funded. And I'll just share with you some of the projects. Some of these students They just blow you away. I mean, they are just so impressive. So the first inaugural prize went to, we actually had dual winners. And again, Eduardo can smile because some of them are in engineering school. But the two on the left are Sade and Alfredo. They actually went to high school together in Houston. It was sort of a specialized high school around healthcare. And they were working with a faculty member here at Penn around a wearable technology around Parkinson's. And this Parkinson's impacted this particular faculty member, and so it was very meaningful for them to have the opportunity to work with the faculty member. Fever Smart, which are the two gentlemen on the upper right, when they applied for the prize, they had already had manufacturing in China. They had sales, and so what it is think about the thermometer. Thermometer, we always remember your mom put it in your mouth and she came by and she took it out and she looked at it, is that what they developed was a continuous reading thermometer. And where it came out of is that their freshman roommate, he had some type of disease that he would constantly be rushed over to the emergency room. And part of it was that they could anticipate his needs if they could get a more continuous reading of his thermometer. So these two guys, along with one of their sisters, actually figured out a business plan while they were at Penn, developed sales. They had like $125,000 sales, had production, manufacturing. They're working with local hospitals. Very, very impressive team. Now, William Fry is, I think he's Wharton in Arts and Sciences. His idea was basically saying, how can we accelerate code development by creating a library of reusable code? He's actually decided to hang up the business. And then these three are another great team. These are the most recent winners. They actually took technology from a Penn faculty member that they learned about through one of the competitions. And what they're doing is using nanotechnology to address glaucoma. In other words, it would be a small device in your eye to deal with sort of vision loss and delay the onset of glaucoma. And so, again, three very bright. It's a combination. I think there's an engineer, a Wharton, and a college student in here. So again, what's nice to see is the diversity of the schools represented. I should say, Lois, that the nursing school cleans up on the engagement prizes. I mean, the nursing undergraduates are highly motivated, and but again, so this is not just it's like a culture that just does not impact the faculty, but also it goes down to the student level as well. So these are some of the incentives for the community in terms of, I mentioned it before, there are various competitions, the Y Prize, the App It Up competition, SING, the Center for Technology, has a seed grant. So again, a lot of the different units at Penn are very engaged in this activity. So that's sort of it on the people. Any questions? Yes. That's a fair question. It's something I have not thought about, but that is you're right. The examples we do, we put that there. I think there is a focus on the humanities, but not so much in the sort of the application of what you're discussing. So that's a fair point. I don't have an answer for that. Anyone want to help me out? Jerry, any thoughts? Well, you'd argue the resource they have is like a Kelly Writer House to do that, right? I mean, they've got, Al recruits specific students in to work with writing, I think the arts is an area that probably needs more investment here. So writing a great screenplay or the like, the support there could be stronger. But you're right, the focus is, technology is hot as a field, but you're right, Anita, it's like if you don't have the skills to think critically, how are you able to be successful? One of the interesting things as an aside is that when we recruited our new chief investment officer from Yale, he's been trying to build a young team of talent that he can sort of train versus hiring senior people. We have a nice team of senior people. But as he interviews Penn students, he absolutely loves the students in the college, okay? Because he finds in terms of writing, in terms of critical thinking, he doesn't want sort of the Wharton student that that did excellent in Fin 10, you know? So it's just interesting how sort of a new person in our community getting the whole canvas, that's what he kind of prefers, as an aside. So, Jerry. Yes, yes. That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely. And the world is a better place for both. Yes. So, any other comments or questions? All right, Janice, I am going to call on you at some point. I'm just warning you. So, okay. All right. So one of the things that you may remember your time at Penn is there used to be a group called the Center for Technology Transfer, and what's happened is we have basically sunsetted that group, which was generally focused on the second blue box, not the second, the second blue box over here, licensing. The thing we would find is that our technology was so early stage, you might license it to someone, but they didn't do any further development on it. So it would kind of sit on the shelf at the company that licensed it. And so what we've tried to do is create a more integrated approach to this so that it includes corporate contracts and alliances, which are in a different group, what we call PCI Ventures, which is the support for the startup activities. This alliances piece is another area that's grown pretty rapidly. So entities like Novartis that want to have a broader relationship with Penn, again, versus doing this piecemeal, kind of a more integrated organization. And so they just published their annual report, and I just borrowed a couple of examples here of some activities. Again, I wanted to show you some of the diversity here. So William Beltran and Gus Aguirre from the vet school have been awarded a patent in the area of X-linked retinitis pigmentosa, of which it impacts 250,000 people worldwide, of which there are no patents. No FDA-approved treatments for the condition. So big development there in the vet school. You see, though, the work there, again, partnerships between Penn Design and the arts and sciences in the biospace, which is generally around prototyping platform. And then Jim Wilson is doing a lot of his work in gene therapy has really come back into favor, and a lot of alliances forming out of there. So the kind of work that PCI would do to support that is that they would work on the patent for the professors once they get a disclosure, and also negotiate the alliance in the case of Jim Wilson. So we measure everything here at Penn. Notwithstanding Peter Kahn's always teasing me that we measure too many things at Penn. But if you're going to make an investment like we've made in this organization, you want to know, is it successful? And so one of the nice things you see here is the number of agreements have basically doubled since 2014. Again, a sign of the interest in the space. The number of startups. Now, you may ask, if we could license something, why would we do startup? Some of the time, some of the technology is so exciting, it belongs in a startup. But sometimes there are no other options other than a startup. And so there can be various reasons, but we don't do a ton of startup companies, but we do some, and we have a support mechanism placed on that. You see the number of patents that have been issued is relatively stable, and the number of the filings have actually gone up. A little bit of this comes out of some of the alliances that we've done, which have led to more, like with Novartis and the like, more corporate alliances have led to more activity. This is a snapshot of the revenue from PCI and what we were trying to achieve back in 08 or 09. Basically, the base revenue was around $12 million. So notwithstanding the research portfolio that Penn had, the amount of activity, that dollars coming into that was only 12 million. We've been able to significantly grow that blue bar, which we'll call base revenue. The other colors that are called out there are more what I will call one-time activity. We monetize, so for example, we securitized a revenue stream, which led to the big jump in 2013. But I think the slope of the line in terms of the blue, the right direction. Now this is very lumpy, and we can't always project this very well. So I thought it would be interesting, though, to share with you. This is data from the Association of University Technology Managers. And what this shows is over a 4-year period, what is the probability or chances of basic research dollars actually leading to commercialization opportunity? And so just start up here at the top yellow, $4.6 billion of research, okay? Which leads to roughly 1,900 disclosures. So a disclosure basically is, I think I have something novel that's patentable. So that would go to the office, and that would lead to patent applications. Now he says 75%, that should be more like 50%. Then of that 893 in patent applications, and just so you know, this would include kind of Ivy++. This is probably AAU institutions, so this is an N of roughly 50 or 60. That would lead roughly to a third of that would be sort of an option or a license. And of those options or license, only a small fraction, 2%, would produce an income stream over $1 million, okay? And then of what isn't leading to over $1 million might be a startup, which is around 2.4%. So if we take the startups and the over $1 million, the chances of a big hit is relatively small. But we don't really do it for the big hit. You do it because you're trying to take the value of the intellectual property and put it in the world, and then it will get molded and used in a way that can better society. And if in fact there is a big hit, all the better, but it's not the true motivation. So then I know Anita Summers would ask me, well, what's Penn's experience, okay? So now this time period is a little different because my overeager people doing this slide for me said, oh, Craig will want the most current data. So this actually takes, hold on, did I do Penn? Oops, I was meant to do them the other way. So this is the market. I should have done it the other way, I'm sorry. This I should have done first. This is 12 to 16. So you see here the numbers from the whole market is even smaller. So 0.01, 2.5 versus 2 and 2.4%. So you can see that we're a little bit better than the market, but pretty consistent with how the overall market for this is. So you see here how that waterfall comes down. A little bit confusing. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. So one of the big changes I mentioned, if you go back to those circles I showed you, was the growth of kind of corporate sponsored research. And so we want to talk a little bit about this. This tends to get people uncomfortable. So I want to talk about kind of the relationships and how we manage them. So you see there what those blue bars refer to as we call industrial clinical trial agreements. As Penn Medicine has grown, the number of clinical trials has increased pretty dramatically, as well as our investment in the infrastructure to support that. But also the red bars represent what we call industrial sponsored research agreements. So sometimes what will happen is a company will say, set up a company, we want to be an investor in that or a partner, and then the dollars that are put in to capitalize that company, that sponsored research can come back to Penn, and those dollars can be used to further the idea. So it's basically a mechanism to get more sponsored research dollars into Penn to further the intellectual property. And you see there that impacted, like Novartis, Teamunity is Carl June's company as it relates to what's not being done with Novartis. Regenix is a gene therapy company. A lot of these are actually related to gene therapy. And then the Sean Parker Institute is in gray. So this is sort of a growing area of source of funding for sponsored research. And here, so why do we do it? One, it provides sort of context for people in terms of solving real world problems. It provides some financial support. It provides a pipeline for potential employment of graduate students and postdocs. And one of the interesting things that's going on as well is some of the foundations would like to see more multi-institutional partnerships. And this was particularly true with Celgene and with Sean Parker, where they didn't want one institution. What they wanted to do was put money at 4 or 6 institutions and force collaboration among those institutions and the faculty doing the work. And this is sort of one of the, if you remember Joe Biden and the moonshot, there's this notion that the work is too siloed, and if only we could share it across institutions, we could get more progress in some of these areas. And so we're seeing foundations be aggressive in that space as well. So that's kind of it on the process. So any questions or comment on process? All right. So we're going to wrap up. We're going to come in for the home stretch here. We'll talk a little bit about place and so where innovation happens. So it happens all across Penn. It happens in our academic buildings. It happens translational medicine at the hospital. But in terms of a dedicated place, when we acquired the former DuPont campus across the river, we've kind of dedicated that as a place for these type of collaborations with industry or for startup activity. You see there that circle is a 23-acre campus there that has really begun to flourish. We probably have over 300 employees there, more than when DuPont left, and probably close to 70 different activities there. And we'll dig a little bit deeper into that. So just to give you a sense of an aerial view of where it is, believe it or not, even though it doesn't feel like it, it's only about 2 miles from campus, but it feels like 10. And that's one of the things that we have to work on over time. I see my good friend Gene Finley back there, and Gene is not only a wonderful Penn employee, but we're both fosters at the Working Dog Center, and that's another example of vet school. That program's over at this space as well. So, but the reason I show you this diagram is that the PIDC, the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, which kind of oversees economic development for the city, they are looking at the lower Schuylkill as a potential industrial zone to kind of that they like to see some of the land across the river take advantage of to grow. So they like having the anchor of Pennovation at this node on the Schuylkill. So you'll hear the word Pennovation. I won't tell you how the word came about, but it's taken. I would say it's 50-50 on people loving it and sort of they're not so sure. But we refer to sort of the entire campus as the Pennovation Works, sort of borrowing from the days of the waterworks, the ironworks, so that's the Pennovation Works. But we refer to the center, which is the heart of, which is the incubator activities. That's separate from the works. And a couple of features about the center that I think are worth noting. On that ground floor, where you see those trees, those are actually inventor garages. Literally, you can pull it up and close it like your garage at home. Very popular, completely full on day one. The second floor is our co-working space. And interestingly, as much as people talk about the desire to collaborate and it's not had the uptake that we expected. I'll talk a little bit how we're pivoting that. People actually don't like working in open environments. They want a door and they want to be able to protect their ideas. The third floor, though, is where the School of Engineering moved the robotics activity. So Dan Kotacek, who again Eduardo recruited from Michigan, if I remember right, he's been a wonderful trooper in bringing the program down here. And so if you go down here on a Friday, and Dan spends time down here along with VJ, the place is buzzing. So the floor is sort of an open room like this, where the different robotics are being tested. It's amazing to see. You see this jagged edge to sort of give the building sort of an iconic feel. These are actually pitch bleachers, so for teams to practice their pitches and so they can have an audience and the like, and it's gotten some uptake. So that just gives you a flavor for what it is. Also, I should say on the second floor and on the other side is where we actually have wet labs, and one of the hot things in Philadelphia right now is a dearth of wet lab space for life sciences companies. And again, these were fully occupied. So this building is completely occupied among others on the campus. The only thing that we haven't realized is sort of the co-working membership. That's I jumped ahead. This is just another image of closer image of the center. So what are we trying to achieve here? Well, one is we're trying to provide affordable space as well as some educational opportunities, and we have different degrees of membership. As I mentioned, the co-worker, the resident, and it's also because it's such an iconic place. People love to have events and meetings there, and so it's drawn a lot of attention. Now, these are some of the companies that are here, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. Some of them are Penn related, and some of them are not even connected to Penn. They just want to be in the environment. So I mentioned before to you the Fever Smart. Those are the folks that won the Innovation Prize, so they're still there. The Limelight Bio is actually the CEO is a former CHOP, a research scientist, and they're working on debilitating inherited diseases. Alevi works on sort of 3D tissues and sort of the imaging of 3D tissues. I mentioned IQ Motion. Yeah, so a lot of them are connected. This aerial applications is really interesting in that, again, it comes out of our robotics interesting. So they were actually called upon to use their applications for some of the hurricane devastation with Hurricane Florence in South Carolina and North Carolina. So just really exciting to see some of the technology in application. Now, who's in the works? These are some great stories as well. On the upper left, you see Dr. Henry Danielle from the dental school, who we recruited from the University of Florida. And so Dr. Danielle, to come to Penn, he has a whole host of patents. He needed a greenhouse. Well, last time I checked, a little hard to do a greenhouse up at 40th and Spruce. I mean, I don't really have the space. So again, a trooper. So what he does is he's actually, with Gates funding and NIH funding, trying to develop the delivery of medicines through plant leaves, through lettuce leaves. So going back to the day when plants were able to deliver medicines. So obviously toxicity is a big issue. But so his greenhouse is down here, and largely because we had a space to put it in. So I would argue that Pennovation has helped us with faculty recruitment. I've already given a shout out from my friends at the vet school, but Gene and I are both fosters at the Penn Vet Working Dog Center. They are in space that I'm sure I will never be able to get Cindy out of. I mean, so so that's a neat program that gets a lot of attention and helps us with the city and state and local, particularly because there's a shortage of working dogs in America, and so they have to import a number of dogs. And so Cindy's idea is, can you develop a breed of working dog based on the research she's doing? In fact, the dog that I'm fostering right now is being trained in stolen antiquities research. So literally working with the Penn Museum, they have a grant from a group in Boston called Red Arch, and what they're doing is training the dogs if there's a scent around these antiquities from 40,000 years ago. Or 4,000 years ago. And yeah, and so far, like my dog, the dog, I'm very, very proud of my dog, is he gets 5 out of 5 on the wheel every time. And so, so kind of very, very interesting. So these are some examples here, and let me see if there's others worth, but like for example, Netronics is a company out of Drexel. Novaputics is one of our upstart companies dealing with type 2 diabetes. The Graduate School of Design has a design studio there. So again, there's been good uptake with the various schools and the Penn community. But we've also been able to get private sector support. So the Hershey Company read about the Pennovation Center in the Alumni magazine, and the gentleman doing business development there called us up and said, I want to be down here. We're like, what on earth did Hershey, what does a chocolate company want to do at the Pennovation Center, and they said there are so many applications of we were thinking about doing drug delivery through chocolate. I mean, one of the things going on in the corporate sector is all these companies, whether it's the biggest ones, they're all worried about being disrupted. I mean, Vanguard, who disrupted a whole industry, is worrying about being disrupted. Hershey's saying, if people aren't eating sugar anymore, how am I going to reinvent my company? And they want to cut out the middleman. Before they would hire a consultant who would then go on all our websites and talk to our faculty and come back with a report. They're saying, let's cut out the middleman and get right to the source. So there's this desire for more nexus with us. So Comcast has been another big supporter. They've got their whole new innovation center opening up at 18th and Arch. I mentioned Qualcomm. And one of the nice things about our wet labs, Merck was shutting down some facilities in northern New Jersey, had all this brand new equipment, and basically donated it to us. So, I mean, kind of a win-win. So, but coming soon, just announced, is what's called a J-Pod at Philadelphia. What a J-Pod is, Johnson & Johnson has been setting up this concept of J labs in different but they look at Philadelphia, and a lab would take like 2 years to do, and they've come up with another concept, which is called a pod. So we took that second floor, and we put a pod in there, which is really a telecommunications center. And what they do is they pick companies, and then they assign a JPAL, which is someone within the company. They take no intellectual property. They're just advisors. They put them into their networks. And so the other nice thing about this is meant to be a regional asset. This is not captive to Penn. So they want to see the best ideas at Temple, at Jefferson, at Drexel, at CHOP, at Wistar. It's like there'll be a competition, but it will not be captive to Penn. But the reason you said, why would we host it? Because I want the activity to create more density here at the Pennovation Center. So, in conclusion, you've heard a lot about kind of the people doing innovative things here, how we approach it process-wise, the services we offer, and then where we do it. And so are we making any traction? So as long as this ranking holds out, we're going to keep showing it. As you know, rankings are the things you love to hate. But Reuters did a survey of the top most innovative universities, and this is a good list for Penn to be on. So we think we're making traction in terms of our reputation as being a source and a hotbed of innovation. So that's my final slide, and we have, we're at 4:30. But we have time for a few questions.
Thank you. This has been absolutely fascinating and so wonderful to hear. I haven't thought about these questions for about 20 years, but certainly 20 years ago, what was on my desk was some of the concern about the difference between what corporations are trying to do with knowledge and what universities are trying to do with knowledge. Particularly, universities create knowledge for open access to publish.
Yep.
Corporations want to maintain ownership because they want to make money on the idea. And I often saw our graduate students caught in the middle between this, of being concerned about when corporations supported their research and their faculty that they weren't going to be able to publish their ideas as freely as they might want to. Are those kind of stresses still there, and what's happening with them?
No, absolutely. So I don't know if you all were able to hear that, but basically the tensions that exist between sort of academia and corporation, particularly around use of information, we develop it so we can benefit society. And so those tensions are still there. We have sort of these inviolable principles of these agreements, and publication rights is one of them. And so if in fact someone wants to restrict publication, we don't take the money. You know, it's like that simple. I mean, our general counsel is quite clear on that. We have to be flexible, but that's not an area that we're flexible on, because that sort of goes against the ethos of what we're about. So, yeah, but those tensions are definitely. I mean, there's lots of tensions as it relates to kind of conflict of commitment and conflict of interest. I mean, look at this whole Sloan Kettering and the New York Times front page. You know, where basically the one of their top cancer doctors was not disclosing his financial relationship to companies in publications. You know, so he has sponsorship from the company, but not disclosing. Now, who knows? You know, like the defense is he was giving the money back to Sloan Kettering. But I mean, you've just got, you cannot. Your reputation is too important. you got to be clear and transparent in this space. So, yes, Marguerite. Marguerite, this is off the record. I want to see this in the almanac. Okay, okay.
So, Craig, I recall you mentioned something pertaining to innovation the other day at the lovely Trolley Portal event. I wonder if you could say a word or two more about that non-Pennovation corner of campus and the prospect for that stretch being invigorated as well.
I'm glad to talk about it. I don't think I used innovation there. I said lots of thank yous to people. So what Marguerite's referring to, if you get a chance, one of my side jobs is I get to chair the board of the University City District, and at 40th and Baltimore, there's a trolley portal, which was a testament to concreteness. I mean, basically a huge slab of concrete and what they've been able to do. And basically more people pass through that portal than any other part of SEPTA's system. And what they've done is they've done beautiful landscaping. There's a trolley car cafe there, so really kind of brought it to life. I don't think there was, where's the innovation angle? I'm not following. Oh, I know where you're going. Yep, no, you're right. I mean, so what I said at the conclusion was this development on this end of 40th Street is part of a larger investment we're going to see on 40th Street. And the Wharton School is actually partnering with engineering in what's called the Entrepreneurship Center or Venture Lab, a 7-story building at 40th and Sanson, which will be to support undergraduate students. And now Anita's going to tell me I need something for the humanities kids, but no, it's yes, exactly. We have some things going. I can't be more specific, but that's my next meeting. So, Eduardo.
Yeah, this makes me feel very old because I grew up in a world where I was told that research is a money-losing proposition, and that teaching is what really drives the university. Sam Preston, former Dean of Arts and Sciences, had a bar chart for all the departments of arts and sciences. And the biggest beautiful cash cow was Romance languages. And the biggest loser was chemistry. Okay? And he was trying to transfer chemistry and physics to engineering. So, and then this is the old-fashioned way of thinking, very simple. And you show us this avalanche of activities on the science end now, and a tremendous investment. I am having difficulty seeing how this is all paid for, okay? Because I know grants don't pay for buildings and deans have to run around trying to find bricks. Is there a limit to that growth?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, I think that I would say the university model depends on growth of revenue streams that can grow faster than inflation. And so if you think about tuition, particularly net tuition, it sort of barely covers keeping the lights on. But if you know, between philanthropy, between technology transfer, the endowment, that's what kind of helps pay for the enterprise. And so keeping that in balance, is the kind of the beauty of Penn, and which is that when one field is hot, another may be down, and kind of vice versa. And so, if you look at where we've grown enrollment-wise, it's generally been in master's programs. It's not been at the undergraduate. PhD, if anything, is shrinking a little bit. And so it's taking some of this knowledge and creating more educational opportunities to kind of attract more students. So, we're able to pay for it. I think, think about medicine has this large health system that supports the School of Medicine. And different schools have different side activities that help kind of fuel some of that growth. So I think it's sort of a combination of all of that then versus one thing. But I think society calls on us, given the urgent problems, to make these and to provide these facilities investments. One of the things that brought so much pride to me was when Gene Bennett and Al McGuire came to talk to the trustees about the work they'd done on blindness for that young boy like 10 years ago. And they said, if it weren't for the investment Penn made in these facilities 20 years ago, we would never have been able to do this work. And so that's the other thing we have to realize. whatever revenue we generate is work that was done from 20 years ago. I mean, the lead time on this is really long. So, and that's the beauty of a university. We have time is on our side and gives us the perspective to do things. I don't know if I really answered your question, but it's somehow we make it work. Yes. Listen, no one's happier than me in September when the kids come back. I mean, you know, so Jerry.
A lot of what you said reminds me of the talks that were given about the University City Science Center. And so I'm wondering how that ties into this as well.
Yeah, great question. So if you go back in time, the Science Center was really set up to be where this type of activity would occur. I think that through time, its mission got a little murky. I mean, I think it's done better in the last decade or so. But I think, Jerry, part of it is when people aspire for Philadelphia to be like Cambridge or Palo Alto or San Diego or Seattle, and not everyone does, but many people do, you need density. So the question is, how can these nodes, whether it be what Drexel imagines, what the Science Center is doing, Pennovation, how can University City have more density? So a lot of what they do is complementary. Some of it's duplicative. I chair that board as well. And to me, people need options because we don't have unlimited resources to support it. They've used some of their profits to support startup activity. And further along technology, we've been awarded a number of activity grants there as well. So I think it's complementary to what we're doing and could be part of the overall kind of growth of University City. Any last questions? Well, you guys have been a terrific audience. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest.